General Srivastava, sir, we will let others keep joining. They are migrating and we can start to save time.
All right, thank you so much, General Arora. Once again, I welcome the session's chair, Brigadier Achal Dilip, and all the eminent panelists for the next session. We are getting into the core of transportation. We will largely be talking about highways and ports and inland water transport in this session. And without much ado, I'll just make a very brief introduction of the chair of this session, Brigadier Dilip. He is the Commandant Faculty of Transport Management at the ASC Center and College and has commanded an ASC battalion in the supply depot. Has also been an instructor at AATS Agra, served in the MS Military Secretary's branch with the prestigious tenure, has also been the Brigadier ASC of the command. Amongst other accomplishments, a host of them, he is also a qualified skydiver. So, over to you, Brigadier Dilip.
So, thank you, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, we can hear you audible.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed an honor and privilege to chair the second session of the webinar on military transport and joint logistics. I'm deeply grateful to General Srivastava, Director CENJOS, General Ravi Arora, Chief Editor, Indian Military Review, and their entire team for this wonderful opportunity. After the extremely illuminating first session, we now have a session on outlook for military transportation, and we are honored to have in our midst a fine set of erudite speakers. Shri Amit Kumar Ghosh is a Joint Secretary Highways in the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. He will be speaking on National Highways Scenario and Future Plans. We have Brigadier G. Kaushal, who is the DDG in the Border Roads Organization, and he will be speaking on the challenges, infrastructure and challenges being faced by the Border Roads Organization. Use of coastal infrastructure and inland water transport for military requirements would be the topic of Captain Sarabjit Singh from Naval Operations at the Naval Headquarters. And thereafter, we are also fortunate to have a speaker who was supposed to be speaking in a different session, but Brigadier Inder Sethi from the Ordnance Directorate will be enlightening us about our experience with the Computerized Inventory Control Project, or the CICP. As warfare and conflict change, logistics should adapt and in fact remain a step ahead by foreseeing trends in the external world long before it becomes apparent to the world at large. Change for the sake of change is best avoided, but change which is driven by operational imperatives is something that is definitely mandated. And in this case, it is driven by the need to comply with reduced teeth to tail ratios and budget cuts. And this implies that the logistics, rather the military logistics, would always have their job cut out for them. Logistics doctrine, processes, and organizational structures should be suitably analyzed and improved upon to meet modern challenges. The proposed theaterization, of course, yet to be implemented, it will have significant impact on logistics for the better. The planned setting up of an integrated logistics command, a step in the right direction, and it will greatly facilitate joint and integrated logistics emanating from the highest headquarters, which displays the importance which has been bestowed upon logistics as well as the intent of the hierarchy. Theaterization would be optimal only in conjunction with national logistics. As we all know, in 2015, a Mirage 2000 aircraft landed and took off from the Delhi-Yamuna Expressway near Mathura, which indicated the glorious potential of such synergy. Such coordination potential exists in rail, road, sea, air infrastructure, warehousing, automobiles, R&D, and communication. Organizationally, it is desirable that a body under the PMO, the Niti Aayog, is constituted comprising of various stakeholders, including the armed forces, the defense public sector undertakings, relevant ministry reps and bodies responsible for roads, airports, and seaports. Our session today is on the outlook for military transportation, which will showcase our road and water infrastructure, our strategic border roads, coastal roads, and IWT resources for military use. This year in the union budget, the government gave a massive push to the infrastructure sector by allocating rupees 2.33 trillion to enhance the transport infrastructure, expanding the national infrastructure pipeline to 7,400 projects. More than half this amount, that is rupees 1.18 trillion, was allocated towards road transport and the highway sector. Better infrastructure will create jobs. It is going to boost the economy of the border areas, and at the same time, it is going to facilitate our mobilization and operations. So, a robust logistics grid could exponentially enhance our military power. However, the government alone cannot take care of all infrastructure requirements, thereby necessitating industry participation. I'm reminded of something which one of our speakers, Colonel Kuber, said. What industry can do, the armed forces and the government should best avoid. The environment for that will need to be created by the government for industry to thrive so that it becomes a win-win situation for the nation. Without further ado, I hand you over to the speakers. Shri Amit Kumar Ghosh is a joint secretary from a ministry which has done the country proud by constructing 1470 kilometers of highways, just to cite an example, just in the month of May this year, as opposed to 847 kilometers in the corresponding month of May last year. I hand you over to him to take on the first of the talks.
And I would like to interject and congratulate Mr. Ghosh for having been empaneled for additional secretary's post just 2 days ago. He's also an army brat. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, sir, for these kind words. I really appreciate, you keeping track of what is happening in my professional life. It's very, very also gratifying that right from the time that I joined as an SDM in UP, I have been treated with great affection by all the Faujis in whichever cantonment that I was posted in that particular district. So thank you so much, sir. Sir, with your permission, I would like the host to allow me to share content so that I can show a small presentation which I have prepared. So if the host could allow me to share content, now I am authorized.
You can share screen one. Screen one. Yeah.
Is it now shared, sir?
Yes, we can see the screen coming up. Yes, we can see it now.
So, a very good morning to all the distinguished panelists and chair of this panel, as well as General Srivastav and General Arora. It is a pleasure to interact on behalf of the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways and share with you our plans. So, the topic allocated to me is National Highway Scenario and Future Plans. I think one mobile is. Yes, sir. So with this topic, I have divided this in my presentation in two parts. One is how we are accelerating the development of roads and highways sector in general. And the second is the border and international connectivity. So if we look at the national highway network, you will find that we are now as Brigadier Kaushal, the chair of the our panel, he very kindly noted we are moving at a very fast clip. And this slide shows to you how we, in the last 7 years, the national highway length has been enhanced by 52%, from 91 odd thousand kilometers to 1.39 lakh kilometers. So this fast growth has brought us many recognitions and also many challenges. What I want to really highlight over here from this slide is that even now the national highways comprise only 2.2% of all the roads of all kinds in the country, but we carry 40% of the total traffic. Now, as the Joint Secretary Highways, the flagship program that I'm in charge of is Bharatmala Pariyojana. And here I would like to say that the Bharatmala Pariyojana, as Brigadier Saab mentioned, has as Brigadier Saab mentioned, has focused on improving the logistics efficiency of the country. So there was a study called LEAP, Logistics Efficiency Enhancement Program Study, done by this ministry in 2015. As noted in the brief provided by, along with the letter sent by General Srivastav, sir, the para 12, in para 12, it talks of improving the logistics efficiency in the country, and basically the cost of logistics in our country as a percentage of the GDP is very, very high. It is, as noted in your note, is nearly about 13-14%. Whereas if we look at what the cost of logistics as a percentage of GDP is in developed countries, in Germany it is 7%. So even 1% or 2% improvement in logistics efficiency can bring benefits of thousands of crores to the country. So with this point in mind, we have come up with Bharatmala program. We are at a kind of inflection point in our Bharatmala program, in the sense that we have awarded about 18,000 kilometers since 2017 November, and now we are planning to go even faster, and we intend to award about a total of about 34,000 plus kilometers of work. So the first point I want to highlight is that we have the corridor approach now. Earlier national highways were going from this city to another city, B to C to D. So if you had to go to Bombay, you went from Delhi to Jaipur, and then to Udaipur, and then to Vadodara, and then to Bombay. Like this you went. Now what we are doing is, we are, as you know, it's very well known, the Delhi-Mumbai corridor we are building. It doesn't touch any big city, and it is fully access controlled. So this is one of the important, change which has occurred in the paradigm of national highway development in the country. So we have under execution 5 expressways. These 5 are, the Delhi-Mumbai expressway, which goes up to Vadodara, and from Vadodara, it joins the Ahmedabad-Vadodara-Mumbai expressway, and then it goes, and we give 5 spurs to connect to JNPT from 5 different points, so that the Jawaharlal Nehru port is connected to Delhi and the entire North India. Second that we are doing is the Ahmedabad-Dholera expressway. Third is Delhi-Amritsar-Katra expressway. This will be a completely access controlled expressway from Delhi right up to Katra, Jammu area. The next is Bangalore-Chennai expressway. This will reduce the present traveling time from between these 2 mega cities in South India by 2 hours. And then we have another coming up in North India, the Kanpur-Lucknow expressway. All will be access controlled. Again, I want to, because we have a large number of such projects, so I'll be happy to share this list, because then a lot of planning, as is noted in para 12 of the brief, can be done by the military authorities on the greenfield corridors that are coming up. For example, Ambala to Kotputli, and Kotputli gives a spur to Bombay. So we have, for example, Raipur to Visakhapatnam, and then we have one to Raipur. So one from Chittoor to Tachur, and from Chittoor we are connecting to Surat. So like this, our connections are such that if you get on to one of the corridors in the country under Bharatmala program, you can travel for 1,000 kilometers at a very fast speed. So these are our new corridors and new alignments that we have come up. All these are new alignments. The second thing is that we want to decongest our cities, because a lot of logistics problems come when we go enter into cities. So we are giving ring roads. We are building more than 28, in fact, ring roads, but that list has become longer and many more cities have been added. So a very large number of cities in the country are getting decongested through ring roads. So I would like to go very quickly to my next slide, where I talk about, the NHIDCL. We set up the NHIDCL in 2014 and we gave them 12 states. These are all hilly states, the northeast, Uttaranchal, now Uttarakhand, Himachal, and J&K, Ladakh. So we have given them these areas and they are operating with, and they have relieved and supplemented the excellent efforts being done by Border Roads Organization, so that Border Roads Organization is now able to concentrate more and more on the border, and NHIDCL is building connectivity up to where the BRO is functioning. So what we have done is that we have entrusted many roads to NHIDCL also. I'll be able to share all these detailed, the projects and their length, etc. Project package wise with the St. Joe's shortly. So what will happen when Bharatmala is completed? From 6 corridors, the 4 arms of the Golden Quadrilateral and the north-south, east-west corridor, we will have 50 corridors. From 40% freight on national highways, we envisage that we will touch 70 to 80% of the freight on the national highways, and we would have connected all the 550 districts with 4-lane highways. So here I would like to say that, we are working in close coordination with state PWDs and border roads. For example, nearly 30,000 crore we have given to state PWDs across the country, and 642 crores have been given to BRO for development of national highways. So this year, the budgetary outlay for our ministry is 81,357 crore, but I'm happy to tell you that we are also allowed to raise about 65,000 crore from the market, from outside the budgetary outlay. This authorization has also been given to us by Ministry of Finance. So we'll be, touching about 1.5 lakh crore of work this year. We are actually doing a lot of work, and we are also facing, issues of capacity, and that is where the role of all our partner executing agencies becomes very important. So now what are we doing? Because I realize that this seminar has a focus on border, strategic areas, and movement of the military convoys. So I would like to talk about in this slide about what we are trying to do in the Northeast region. 10% of our total budget is earmarked for the Northeastern region. We already have about 13,658 kilometers in the Northeast, and these are being developed and maintained. We are trying to connect all the state capitals and the districts of Northeast with national highways. So what I'm here trying to show you is that if you look at the table below, we have a special program for Arunachal Pradesh. So we have given a special package, and we are trying to build about 2,319 kilometers, including roads existing over there. So if you look at what we are doing in Arunachal, we are now building a road parallel to the international border in Arunachal, in which we are calling the Arunachal Border Highway. And this in the next slide, I would like to explain how we are doing. The ministry has approved Arunachal Pradesh package of roads and highways. This will involve construction and maintenance of about improvement of about 2,319 kilometers. In Assam, we are doing a length of 667 kilometers, connecting Silchar to Shrirampur via Lumding, Daboka, Nagaon, Guwahati, and this has been entrusted to NHAI and NHIDCL as part of the East-West corridor. Similarly, there are many other works which are going on in the other states of the Northeast. We realize that connectivity in the Northeast is a very big issue. So there's a lot of focus in our ministry now, and NHIDCL is the nodal agency, as I explained earlier. So how are we, trying to not only build more roads, but also make sure that our roads are road worthy when, the time comes for a lot of mobilization. There should not be any blockages. So in the last 5 years, most of our IRC standards have been, Indian Roads Congress standards have been revised. Indian Roads Congress is headed by the Director General of this ministry, who is the top road engineer to the country. And the Indian Road Congress has now, what we have done is that we are now even in a position to monitor the roughness index. This year, we are trying to get data on roughness index for about 40,000 kilometers across the country, so that we know that the maintenance is of the highest standards. So we are setting up a very, very high-tech road asset management system for this, and where in that that it will be a digital system, and in that we are trying to incorporate all the highway assets that we have. So going very quickly, because I realize that time is running out. We are also, encouraging a lot of alternate materials and latest construction practices for our national highways. So I'll be sharing these details and the background papers on these with St. George. And what I feel is that, lot of work, especially in tough terrain, requires alternative material rather than using the traditional material. Recently, we have entered into an agreement with Japan. Japan is a typical hilly country, and as the leader of the Indian delegation, I had the occasion to visit Japan and see how they maintain their slope management they do, and how they maintain their roads to be always roadworthy. So I found that they pay a lot of attention and spend a lot of resources on doing hillside slope management, so that the rubble doesn't block the highways. I had the occasion to travel on National Highway 1 from Udhampur to Banihal, and I found that at many places we got blocked because the road cutting which has been done in such a manner by our companies that the military convoys and civilian traffic is half the time stuck, especially in the rainy season. So we are trying to bring in new technology and trying to approve, change of scope in the works already given to them, so that our slopes are managed and our strategically important highways are always cleared. So I would like to skip this, because this is basically about how we are trying to manage our accidents on the national highway, how we are trying to look at the road safety aspects and the black spots on our highways, and the advanced traffic management systems that we are deploying on our, especially on our access controlled highways. The brief also talks about the multimodal logistics paths. How multimodality is becoming very, very important. I'm happy to tell you that our ministry was the lead ministry, even when the Department of Logistics in the Ministry of Commerce had not been created. So we notified 35 locations in the country where we are trying to develop, where we feel that multimodal logistics paths should come. A study was done by our ministry, and it was presented to the government and in interministerial committees. What we are trying to think of is integrated hubs where we have multimodal transport. And for example, outside Guwahati, there is a place called Jogi Gofa, and in Jogi Gofa we have come up with a 200-acre area where we are trying to set up a multimodal logistics park, from where which will meet the warehousing and supply needs for the entire Northeast. And we have the Brahmaputra. There is already an existing river port on that river of the Inland Waterways Authority of India. There is a railway line which has to be extended by about 25-30 kilometers. There is a 4-lane highway, and that we have to give a spur to this place. So that work has been sanctioned. So NHIDCL is implementing this project at a cost of about 930 crores to give connectivity. What is going to happen inside is, we are going to bring players in logistics management who will be running that center. So it is very important that we build these integrated multimodal logistics parks at strategic locations in the country, so that not only connectivity, but the needs of logistics, including storage, processing, packaging, these are taken care of. So these are the 35 logistics parks that I'm talking of. These have been identified by our ministry, and we are working on them. What we find is that they have to be commercially viable, and that is where the challenge comes. So connectivity part is the easier part to share with you my thoughts on this. We are also in the highways. It is not only important to bring the highways, but also to provide amenities to our citizens. So we have come up with a wayside amenity policy within NHAI, and we have identified about 500 locations where will be, where people rest places and where people can fuel up their vehicles, charge their electric vehicles, stop by, have food, take rest, go ahead. So what have we done to improve our working? So what we are doing is that we have actually given a number of concessions to the contractors and concessionaires who do our PPP projects, so that given the uncertainties, especially due to COVID, their work is not happening. So we have released a lot of money, including retention money, performance guarantee to them. We have also, now we are saying that, instead of milestone, we'll give you monthly payment based on the value of the work done that month. Then for some projects, we have waived off the bid security amount to some extent. And then also we have allowed wherever there is a problem to appoint subcontractors who are recognized officially by the ministry, and we pay them through the escrow accounts. Now, we have also, because you must be reading that about, we have a huge disputed amounts in NHAI. I'm happy to tell you that we have 3 modalities: the Independent Settlement Advisory Committee, conciliation committees of independent experts, and dispute resolution boards we have set up, and we have been trying to resolve a lot of problems. Recently, Chairman NHAI was invited to an interministerial consultation, in which he explained to all the infrastructure ministries the excellent work being done in this ministry on dispute resolution. So I have tried to give you a snapshot of how through Bharatmala we are trying to connect our country, and because the traffic is growing at nearly 20% plus per annum. So in such a situation, when we build 2 lanes, they are clogged, and when we build 4 lanes, there also we find traffic jams. So we have to have a proper movement, and we have to give more and more corridors. We also have to connect the remote areas of the country. All these objectives are being met through the Bharatmala program. And I'm happy to tell you, for example, if I go into specific projects, the Char Dham project, I was district magistrate in Uttarkashi 21 years ago, and I know that after Jad Ganga, and you had to go to Nilong Valley, you had to go through Gartang Gallery on foot, and one looked down and one used to feel scared. So we were always very far away from our borders, but now we are, whether it is the BRO, which is leading from the front, and the NHIDCL and NHAI and state PWDs in these border areas, we are trying to build our roadworthy roads. There are challenges. For example, there are challenges of court cases and National Green Tribunal, etc. People go there and they say that environment. So we are very, very sensitive to the needs of, towards the needs, a need to preserve the environment and make sure that minimal damage is caused to the ecology of the location. So this is our goal. I'll be very happy to share a lot of data, which because our ministry is a project-based ministry, so we have data on projects and the input and output and outcomes. So I do have a lot of information which we can share, because I think that it is more important to appreciate the basic principles. But here, based on my discussion with General Arora, I would like to say one thing, which is that he had asked me, though I told him that I look after highways in the country and land acquisition, but he had asked me to also talk to this august audience on 2-3 other subjects. So very quickly, one is the interrelationship with the defense insofar as the emission scenario is concerned. So I have these notes from my colleague, the JS Transport, and the Honorable Supreme Court had said that all vehicles which are sold and registered on or after 1st April 2021 have to be compliant to BS 6 emission norms. However, it is also provided, so the ministry has notified that order of the Honorable Supreme Court. However, motor vehicles used for government purposes relating to the defense of the country and special purpose vehicles, armored and other specialized vehicles used for operational purposes for the maintenance of law and order and internal security have been exempted from the mandatory requirements of these emission norms. This has been done as these vehicles are used in difficult terrain, where storage of clean fuels and maintenance of complex on-board diagnostic systems fitted in these vehicles are very, very difficult. So this is one thing that I wanted to share with you all. And the second is that, here we would like to have your support in the sense that digitization of vehicle records. So my colleague has specially requested me to, hello, am I audible? Yeah. So my colleague has specially requested me to apprise all military authorities present here that the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways on the transport side has developed a portal called Vahan for online registration of vehicles, and the records of these vehicles are stored in the Vahan database. This database is also used for law enforcement and investigation purposes whenever needed. It is suggested that a dedicated portal may be developed by Ministry of Defense for registration and allocation of registration mark to the vehicles, their vehicles. A dedicated database of such vehicles can be useful in its deployment to various commands and regimental headquarters. It will also help in verifying the vehicles entering army cantonments, whether those vehicles, even if they are looking like defense vehicles, whether they are actually registered on the portal and are authorized or not. And secondly, civilian vehicles which are coming into cantonments, so because you can link this portal with Vahan, so verification can be done with proper security of the data of military vehicles. It will also help you to link because you have the requirement of trailers which are commercial in nature in case of any requirement by Ministry of Defense, and the trailers can be tracked on real-time basis. So this is one suggestion from the transport side. And the third suggestion is that we have mandated, this ministry has mandated specific color code for registration plate for different types of vehicles used by the civilians. In the same way, Ministry of Defense may also consider standardizing a color for registration plate, which will be unique and will be used by Ministry of Defense only. So these are the three suggestions, gentlemen, which I have received and I have shared with you. This brings me to the end of my presentation, and I thank you for the opportunity and also for listening to me patiently. I'll be happy to answer any questions if there are in this regard.
Yeah, Mr. Ghosh, you told me that you will get busy with other meetings. There is one question I will read out to you. Can we look at sustainability and circular economy while constructing such vast roadways, which reduces the depreciation of material?
This is a question on which we keep working, sir. Because
Sorry, we lost your voice.
sorry, yeah, I had muted myself. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sir, this is a very important question. As a ministry which makes mega investments to the tune of 1.3 to 1.5 lakh crore per annum, we are aware that the need to minimize the cost is paramount. We are forever working through different expert committees who are suggesting to us whether it is putting integrated structures across small streams and canals rather than building bridges in the traditional manner or use of alternative materials. We have commissioned many studies in collaboration with NEERI and other environmental institutes who have given us suggestions, and we are implementing them. But the fact is, investments have to be made because India has to ramp up its infrastructure, and we are in a hurry to do so. So there are two ways in which we recover the cost of the investment. One is straightforward. I did not show you a slide on that, but I remember the discussion with our honorable minister when we decided to make ETC, electronic toll collection through FASTags, completely mandatory in the country. And I asked for 5 months, and he gave me 3 to come up with the system. And under the pressure, we performed rather well. And I'm happy to tell you that our FASTag-based collection, electronic toll collection, has gone up by many 100%. But the more important thing, sir, here is that whenever national highways, wherever they go, they carry with them, the possibility and potential of economic development. So when I share with you the data on our greenfield projects, you will find that many of them, whether it is Amritsar Jamnagar greenfield access controlled expressway, or Delhi Mumbai, or Visakhapatnam to Raipur, we are connecting origin and destination based such places which are respectively centers of production and centers of consumption. This will actually boost the economic development of the country as a whole and of these places in particular. I think this will be a very good return on our investments for the country. There are other issues which are related to this issue of the circular economy. Frankly, we are encouraging state governments, because that is not our mandate, to develop industrial townships along these highways, which are access controlled. Will give them special access, building special access structures for those townships. And I'm happy to tell you that Andhra Pradesh has come up with a project proposal in which they have proposed more than 10 industrial cities, pharma cities, medi cities, so that is the way to go ahead in our country, and not only build roads, but to, do value capture as we go along these highways. Not only habitations, but specific economic activity. Here, I would like to mention that the DPIIT in Ministry of Commerce and Industry has drawn up a very, very ambitious plan, what is called the National Master Plan. This master plan is a vision of Honorable Prime Minister. Last year, there was a presentation before him to connect two industrial nodes, one in Andhra and one in Karnataka. And Honorable Prime Minister desired that let us connect all the industrial nodes existing and upcoming in the next 10, 15 years. So that was given the name of National Master Plan. We have been working on it in tandem with other infrastructure industries led by DPIIT. And our plan is ready. It is ready for launch whenever higher authorities allow that. And presently, this National Master Plan connects every industrial node in the country, every economic zone in the country, every location of special economic importance where, for example, some electronics cluster or some rural industries sector cluster. And the most important focus in that is connect Northeast. So it is an important component. It is an important addition to our Look East policy. So the entire Northeast connectivity has been given a complete makeover and improved upon. So because it has not been launched, so I have not showed you any slides on that. But last point I want to say, which is related to the question, what is this? Yeah, sorry, there was some problem and I was muted. But our chairman of the panel, he was kind enough to mention about the national infrastructure pipeline. So in this infrastructure pipeline, we have a very, very major presence. And it is not only about building roads. The idea is to have a pipeline of projects. How will we monetize them? How will we give it to private parties to, and they will pay us upfront through models like what we call toll, operate and transfer TOT model, through which we have raised about 14,000 crores in the last 2 years. So we are trying to monetize our policy products. So in the circularity, it is very important to have a monetization plan, and that is also part of. So presently, I am engaged in with Niti Aayog is leading this. They are working on the National Asset Monetization Plan. So they have also called it the AMP. So we are working also on a lot of acronyms: National Master Plan, National Infrastructure Pipeline, and Asset Monetization. Sir, I think for the purpose of this conference, I would like to stop here. And in case there is anything else, I'll be very happy to share information later. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Ghosh, are you there? Yeah. Mr. Ghosh, are you there?
Yes, sir, I can hear you, sir.
Okay. I just have a small question.
Put some volume on the TV.
Thank you for a very good insight into what the ministry is doing. You mentioned coir fiber. Coir fiber for slope stabilization. So can you tell us, where have you tried it out? Have you tried it out?
Yes, sir. So I mentioned to you that I had the occasion to work with the team under the JICA partnership, the technical team deputed by JICA in India. And we looked at the various options and possibilities for providing solutions for slope stabilization. So coir-based slope stabilization has been tried in the Northeast. I do not remember the name of the location right away, but it has been tried. In fact, there are 2-3 types of solutions that are presently, apart from coir, which are being tried. And it will be my pleasure to we have one, in fact, an ex-army officer, Colonel Aluwalia, who is working with us as executive director in NHIDCL. And he and I, we have both interacted with the JICA team on this. And I'll be very happy to share the details with you.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh.
Thank you very much, sir.
May I take on, sir?
Yeah, please.
We thank Shri Amit Kumar Ghosh ji for a very, very illuminating talk. And in fact, one of the acronyms that he used is going to be lingering on for a very long time, and that is the Logistics Efficiency Enhancement Program, the LEAP, because that is what we need. We need a great leap forward in military logistics. He spoke about reducing the logistic costs in the country, the Bharatmala project, and a very interesting paradigm was connecting two mega cities like Bombay and Delhi without touching any of the other cities, which showed me the possibility that the development is not driven purely by economic considerations, but also for the need to develop the country holistically, which is a it's a very encouraging thing as far as border infrastructure development is concerned. I now request Brigadier Kaushal to take over and tell us about the challenges being faced by the Border Roads organization, with a request, of course, for an eye on the time. Thank you.
Good morning, gentlemen. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Firstly, a very good morning to General Srivastav, General Arora, the chair, my fellow panelists, and the esteemed audience. I would like to take your permission to share a presentation for better communication of my issues. Okay, just to confirm, is my presentation visible to the audience, please?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, good morning, gentlemen.
Gaurav, can you expand your screen? It is contracted. Can you make it full screen?
Is that any better now, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Before I commence my presentation on the issues with respect to road infrastructure and the challenges, I'd like to thank Shri Amit Kumar Ghosh for the information he's given, very reassuring with respect to the development of the road infrastructures in the hinterland, and also for his acknowledgement of the efforts that the border roads has been putting up primarily in the regions that are the remote parts of this country. With that as a little background, I'll cover my presentation or my talk under the following heads. While I'll focus on what the border roads has been doing and is presently engaged in actively, while doing so, I shall also address the various challenges and then look at some of the initiatives that the organization has taken to deliver better on what we are trying to do. As we are aware that the border roads is spread out largely in the areas along the northern borders and some parts along the western borders. Presently, we've got a total of 17 projects with as many as 34 task forces deployed all along the very remote areas. Our tasks essentially relate to road construction, bridges and tunnels, with some amount of efforts now been putting in onto the airfield related aspects and the air infrastructure. With regards to roads, as you can see on the view foil, a total of 60,000 plus kilometers roads has already been constructed, largely handed over to certain agencies like the state PWD, the CPWD. 22,000 plus remain under the maintenance charter of the border roads. We continue work on 7,200 plus kilometers. And as you see on the bottom of the view foil, I'd like to bring out that with respect to connectivities along the Indo-China border, both in the northern and the central sectors, as well as in the eastern sectors, we've made very good headway. As many as 59 roads out of the envisaged 61 destinations have been reached. Our focus largely remains at enabling the country deliver on the security front, but we also enable an outreach of the economic development of the country to these parts. As you can see now, circumventing the glaciers, making way through the moraines. As you see on the bottom right-hand corner, the height of a glacier snout itself is 70 feet above the road level. So despite the best of our retaining walls and other such protective works, many times we are at the mercy of nature. Talking of the challenges with respect to terrain, certain stretches extreme hard rock, as you can now see this road stretch at altitudes of 12,000 plus feet, sheer rock face through which you have to cut your way through, makes the project very challenging, as well as having danger with respect to the safety and security of the equipment and the manpower involved. Another pictorial depiction of certain very hard rock terrain. Now, while we do encounter hard rock, there are also certain fractured strata that compound our difficulties. Here you can see a complete hill face suddenly giving way as we do the drilling and the boring through the rock face. Snow, a perennial challenge. Some parts of our country remain inaccessible. Though I'd like to place on record the border roads over the last couple of years has progressively been able to reduce the durations for which we do not remain connected to our remote areas. This year also, in the months of March and April, we did open a large number of passes which traditionally were opening in the ends of May and early June. While we do endeavor to have a multi-point attack to address the road construction, there are certain challenges which have now been partly offset with the arrival of the Chinooks, and thereafter our capabilities to heavy lift some of our equipment to address construction at multiple points. Talking of bridges, now bridges is another area where the border roads has very seriously given effort to. 734 already completed, 240 plus under our maintenance charge. Very recently, in the month of June itself, we dedicated to the nation another set of 63 bridges, 234 presently under construction, and 200 more are already in the very planning stage. So a very high degree of emphasis on bridge construction. This also involves replacement of the certain equipment related bridges which were initially constructed to achieve the connectivity in a faster time frame. Now I'll just go over that when the border roads does development works in the remote areas, we essentially focus on the equipment bridges. Bailey bridges is the most commonly used, and in certain places we also use the Bailey suspension bridges. This is a view foil which shows you the connectivity of a 1400 feet bridge in the DBO area, as also along the western borders in Kasawal to link one of our enclaves and sensitive areas. In the northeast, we have made very many innovative ways of constructing bridges. You can see a 430 feet multi-span bridge connecting the upper Subansiri district. On the approach to the Atal Tunnel, you can now see a prefabricated modular bridge with a footpath. This is what I was talking of, the permanent and the RCC bridges, now which the border roads has gone in for a very big way to replace some of our erstwhile existing bridges, primarily to achieve a load classification of 70, as well as to achieve permanency in the bridges, and therefore address the issues of repeated nature of disruptions in the movement of traffic and convoys. Herein you can very clearly see a Bailey suspension bridge, which was earlier on existing, and adjacent to it has been a 162-meter bridge which has been constructed as part of the Trans-Arunachal Highway connecting the western and the eastern parts of Arunachal Pradesh. Moving on to tunnels, another area where we've made some successful forays, and it's something that we are really looking at with a very high degree of interest and concern. 4 tunnels have already been completed. Under construction, work on 2, and as many as 17 road as well as rail tunnels is what has been planned for and are on the drawing board, which we are looking at executing in the time frame to come. Just to show you the works at the Atal Tunnel. Similarly, a tunnel under the township of Chamba, about 450 meters long, using the Austrian technology, has been constructed. A high-powered committee nominated by the Supreme Court has nominated this and cited this as a methodology to be adopted, especially in the Bagithari economic sensitive zone. Right now, we are involved in the construction of a tunnel at Sela in Arunachal, as also another area in the stretch between Tawang and Bhalukpong, the Nerchipu tunnel. Like I did mention about the airfields, there was a time when we were very actively involved, and 19 airfields were constructed by the border roads. 5 of them continue still to be maintained by the border roads. Presently, we are looking at construction of another 2 airfields, and there are certain issues which are on the discussion for conversion of some of our ALGs into better class airfields. In addition to what we are doing within the country, there are certain regional footprints of the Border Roads Organization in conjunction with the initiatives of the Ministry of External Affairs. You're aware of the efforts. We have a full-fledged project operational right now in Bhutan. We did construct a 1500 plus kilometer stretch in Myanmar. There is another stretch of around 200 plus kilometers in Afghanistan, and there is also work in Tajikistan that is presently going on. Now I'll just come and address some of the very peculiar criticalities which possibly the border roads faces more than anyone else. It's got a lot to do with the Himalayan ranges being very young, relatively young mountains prone to landslides. I did give you a snapshot of the fractured strata as well as the impact of the glaciers. Another issue that concerns us is the areas where we do operate, the population is not in that large numbers. They have their own concerns with respect to immigrants coming in and working as labor. So those are certain challenges that we do address with the civil administration very amicably. Resources continue to remain restricted. The time frames, primarily because of the weather and the climatic conditions, do make it challenging for the border roads to achieve the objectives, which we have found ways and means to circumvent. Another issue is that while the border roads has gone in for the adoption of the EPC model, reputed construction firms do have a degree of hesitation in coming into such areas, primarily because of the economic payoffs, and therefore technical expertise infusions to that extent is a little bit of a constraint. But we'll definitely find a way out, because a large number of issues are being addressed through us departmentally, and we look at certain issues through the EPC model also. Shri Ghosh mentioned, General Srivastav mentioned about this. This is the challenge of stabilization of slopes to prevent landslides and the repeated disruptions. There are certain initiatives that have already been undertaken in Arunachal. We are extensively using geotextile material to stabilize the formations. It is still in the nascent stages, so we'll have to look and see how it manifests in terms of its durability and reliability in times. But this is an issue that we are seized of, and the border roads is making concerted efforts towards addressing it. Here you can see the challenges of cutting through the rock face, concerns regarding the environmental sensitivities like we did have with the Chamba tunnel in the eco-sensitive zones, and land compensations, land acquisitions remaining a state subject. We do through our regional offices and our task force headquarters and the project headquarters to actively interface with the administration to get over these issues. But then there are individual concerns that get involved, and there are court cases which tend to impede certain developments. One issue I'd just like to flag and bring to the notice of the audience is the kind of terrain in which the border roads operates and the extent of our deployment in terms of our manpower. More than 55% of our troops are actually deployed in extremely high altitude areas, and what in the border roads parlance we term as hard areas. In addition to another 16% being deployed in the hard areas. So it's only about 30% people who can actually be deployed in planes, say in Project Chetaks in the Rajasthan or in the areas of Punjab and the areas of Rajouri and part of Project Sampark. A large number of the troops are in extremely hard and taxing areas, with the age profile definitely not always supporting them, and issues of medical concerns also being there. Despite these challenges, I'd like to state that border roads has successfully achieved many of its objectives. And in the next few slides, I'll just like to highlight very recently the Honorable Raksha Mantri did inaugurate 12 roads in the areas of eastern states of India. He was there at Leh and Ladakh, wherein 63 bridges in as many as 8 different states were electronically unveiled and dedicated to the nation. As part of the initiatives towards Atmanirbharta, and while I did mention the need for upgraded classification of bridges with the GRSC in joint venture with the border roads, we have launched one such 190 feet bridge in the Uttarkashi area, and we are looking at more such bridges coming up to facilitate and expedite the construction process of our bridges. In also giving attention to the emerging best practices, there are 2 aspects that the border roads has very recently focused on, and the Honorable Raksha Mantri on 11th of June unveiled them. One is the Center of Excellence on Road Safety and its awareness. And the second is essentially adoption of the better practices being followed with respect to bridges, airfields, and the tunnels. And this faculty has recently been established in the headquarters DGPR. In pursuance of the initiatives of digitization, not just the road infrastructure and our human resources, but also the works is what we are looking at digitizing. 4 such softwares have recently been put into place, and we are now looking at inventory management and automation of the entire human resources in the remote areas, as also adoption of certain other digital initiatives. We definitely do work with the civil administration. We do have a lot of handshake with the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, with the Ministry of Home Affairs, as well as with the donor, and looking at the eastern part of the country. There are certain initiatives specifically for the civil administration, both as part of the assistance as in HADR operations also. With respect to budgetary allocation, there has been a progressive increase. I would also like to bring forth that the border road still does have a potential for taking over additional works now that we have gone in for the EPC model also. So it would be fair to say that border roads is working at something about 70% of its potential, and we can definitely take on some more initiatives in terms of budgetary allocations to progress works. Part of these funds has also been used to expand our repertoire in terms of the equipment that we are using, as well as the technology upgrades to expedite both the quality and the effectiveness of our works. And in doing these procurements, I'd like to also bring out that we are largely focused on ethical systems of procurement, and border roads was acknowledged as one of the best the government enterprises in terms of utilization of the GEM. With that, gentlemen, I come to the conclusion of my part of the presentation. I'll be open to any queries and any questions, should there be.
Thank you, Brigadier Kaushal, for that really nice talk on the challenges being faced by the Border Roads organization. Long before it became de rigueur for the government to have a look and focus on the Northeast infrastructural requirements, it was the BRO which was prodding on there and doing a splendid job. And whatever infrastructure exists in the border areas today is thanks to the undaunted work being done by them very bravely. We now move over to Captain Saravjeet from Naval Operations, who's going to be speaking on coastal infrastructure and IWT for military use. Over to him.
Thank you very much, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, you're audible.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon to all the members on the panel and to all others who have logged into this current session. My name is Captain Saravpreet Singh, and I am from the Naval Headquarters, Directorate of Naval Operations. To begin with, I'm thankful to the organizers of the seminar to give me an opportunity to share my views on the importance of coastal infrastructure and inland waterways for military logistic requirements. To set the stage for my talk, I'd like to bring out how important the military logistics is, even in peacetime, and how subtle and unnoticed it goes when the operations are smooth and successful. The COVID-19 pandemic brought to the fore the unprecedented challenges for the entire nation, including the services. Since its outbreak early last year, the Indian Navy has been at the forefront in the nation's fight against the pandemic and has assisted the national effort wholeheartedly. During these testing times, Operation Samudra Setu was launched by the Indian Navy to bring the stranded Indian diaspora back from the neighboring nations. In the process, approximately 4,000 Indian nationals were safely brought back home. What went unnoticed and largely unreported was the efficient logistics which was working behind the scenes to make this happen. The role played by the coastal and port infrastructure in facilitating the same is testimony to its importance in supporting military operations across the entire conflict continuum. In end April 21, when the extraordinary second wave of the COVID-19 put tremendous pressure on country's health infrastructure, we again launched Operation Samudra Setu 2 to augment national mission for meeting medical oxygen requirements. 10 of our warships from all 3 naval commands were deployed for shipment of liquid medical oxygen filled containers, concentrators, PPE kits, COVID test kits, ventilators, and other medical equipment from friendly foreign countries across the expanse of Indian Ocean region, from Persian Gulf to Southeast Asia. This maritime bridge, the Samudra Setu by Indian Navy ships, ensured arrival of critical medical supplies to our country. Deployed for nearly 2 months now, Indian naval warships made overall 17 trips, traversing more than 53,000 nautical miles, that is nearly about 1 lakh kilometers, to bring more than 1,100 metric tons of liquid medical oxygen, more than 14,000 oxygen cylinders with 314 kiloliters of oxygen, and other critical medical aid like oxygen concentrators, test kits, ventilators, etc., thereby significantly contributing to improved oxygen availability in the country. This Operation Samudra Setu 2 was executed with extensive coordination between all agencies involved, namely the Ministry of Defense, Indian Navy, Indian Air Force, MEA, Indian missions abroad, and Indian expatriate community. Now, this exorbitant logistic effort would not have been possible without the support of port infrastructures. The available coastal infrastructure, including the road and rail network, ensured smooth movement of critical life-saving material from sea to hinterland destinations in a time-bound manner. Now, one must be wondering as to how this logistics infrastructure relates to the military logistic requirements. At this time, I would like to quote a statement made by a US Navy Rear Admiral Henry Eccles in 1959, where he says, and I quote, "Logistics is the bridge between the economy of the nation and the tactical operations of its combat forces. Obviously, then, the logistic system must be in harmony with the economic system of the nation and with tactical concepts and environment of the combat forces." Unquote. This simple but profound statement acknowledges the complexity and intricacies of military logistics and how it is relevant for tactical unit level operations and how it is linked with the national economic capability. These linkages also underscore the importance of military logistics as one of the elements of military power and its importance as a constituent of comprehensive national power. Military logistics is the most complex of military activities. In the ends, ways, and means paradigm of strategy formulation cycle, it is the most important spoke, providing means for all the desired ends. Unfortunately, for those not trained to see military logistics from this dimension of intellectual, technological breadth, depth, and complexity, logistics is something that just happens in the background. However, this assumption of assumed availability of logistics across the continuum of war may actually prove costly, as this assumption tends to exclude logistics from the debates concerning nations' military preparedness. The debates like this one tend to bring logistics at the same level of discussions as some of the other more publicized warfighting requirements. Coming to the topic proper, the background narrated by me probably makes it evident that a robust coastal infrastructure and inland waterways system has enormous capability for improving national multimodal logistic chain. Consequently, this network would have enormous capability to support military logistics in times of need. The core functions of military logistics are supply, maintenance, deployment and distribution, logistic services, engineering, and probably health services. Now, in the ports, shipping, and inland waterways domain, these facilities are equally applicable to the sustained growth of shipping industry. Thus, developments in coastal infrastructure domain directly impact the military logistic capability in our context. In this context, it would be prudent to highlight that Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways has been pushing for comprehensive development in coastal and port infrastructure through its Sagamala program. And we in the Navy are also somehow involved with the ministry in providing required inputs. I would like to take a few examples here to suggest how these coastal infrastructure development programs have direct or indirect impact on military operations, including military logistics. Firstly, the importance of rail and road connectivity with the ports. Connectivity is one of the critical enablers for ports, as it is the end-to-end effectiveness of the logistics system that drives competitiveness in the industry. India's hinterland connectivity is mainly based on road and rail networks, and railways remains the mainstay for carrying long distance and bulk cargo. Under the Sagamala program, the government is pushing for better rail and road connectivity to the ports. Efficient connectivity between ports and domestic production and consumption centers to rail, road, and domestic waterways is a key pillar for economic activity, and in turn would benefit military's logistic chains also. This initiative, the government can provide more options and operational flexibility to transport military cargo. At present, close to 100 port-to-road connectivity projects and about 90 plus port and rail connectivity projects are at various stages of development, which when completed would help in integration of port, rail and road connectivity, resulting in reduction of logistic costs. Secondly, I'd like to highlight the initiative taken by the Government of India of installing floating jetties for marine and seaplane operations. It can be appreciated that the jetties are the most important component of coastal infrastructure. Importance of constructing permanent jetties for supporting large vessels cannot be refuted. However, Government of India is now progressing ahead with the concept of floating jetties as an alternate and immediate solution for overly crowded fishing harbors, as these jetties do not require any form of permanent construction offshore. These can be conveniently shifted without any significant impact to the environment. Floating jetties and platforms can be set up at marine harbors, fishing harbors, fish landing centers, waterdromes, and for similar facilities in coastal areas, estuaries, waterways, rivers, and reservoirs. In addition to these commercial initiatives, these jetties can also be used for berthing the boats of state marine police and other coastal security agencies. Now, this is particularly relevant in the island territories, wherein the coastal security assets of Indian Navy also are required to be supported while they are deployed for patrolling. It is understood that Government of India is considering construction of about close to construction of these floating jetties at about 200 odd locations, which would be an enabler for maritime operations. Government is also coming up with the plan to leverage the long coastline of India, including numerous waterways, for commencing seaplane operations. The impact of this development on military logistics can be easily fathomed. Thirdly, I would like to bring forth the aspect of energy security. The military of a nation is hugely dependent on the constant supply of fuel and fuels for its operation. India being a net importer of crude oil, the need for a robust coastal infrastructure with capacity to receive the required fuel and POLs at desired ports cannot be overemphasized. An efficient network of roads and rails from these ports provides capacity to transport these to hinterland locations for use by military as well as commercial purposes. It is understood that a number of such projects are being progressed by the Government of India under its National Infrastructure Pipeline Program. These, once implemented, would aid in making the military logistics more effective and efficient. Fourthly, a recent initiative by the Government of India for development of coastal infrastructure in coordination with the low-cost coastal and inland transportation systems provides easy access to sea for hinterland industries. This is an interesting development which has obviated the need for these industries to be located close to coasts. In the long run, a well-established economic activity network can be leveraged for meeting military logistics requirements also. Further, the Indian Ports Association has implemented a digital port facility management system towards ease of doing business. While this may appear to not have any direct impact on military logistics, it needs no reiteration that an efficient port facility management system aids in faster turnaround time for ships in harbor, and this is an important indicator of efficient logistic chain. Thus, in times of need, this would definitely aid military operations also. The need of the hour, however, would be for the military logistics specialists to integrate their respective systems to synchronize with such initiatives in the commercial space. In addition, the development of coastal infrastructure along with inland waterways also enables the vessels, including those arriving from other nations, to directly ship the consignments closest to the end user location, thereby reducing the cost and delivery timelines at the hinterland, which indirectly enhances the efficiency of military logistics also. Furthermore, the impetus of the government to develop the coastal infrastructure and shipping sector shall provide a launchpad for local industries to venture into the field of shipbuilding and ship repairs. These developments can subsequently help the Indian Navy in undertaking repairs of its ships away from naval ports. This would, in the long run, be a huge military capability in terms of flexibility in operational and logistic support. Another not so apparent advantage that accrues from the development in coastal infrastructure is the dual-use facilities that are primarily meant for economic activity, but also provide backbone infrastructure to support nations' coastal security agencies, starting from the vehicle traffic management system to AIS chain to jetties and support facilities. All of these have dual use. While the development of coastal infrastructure, the nation's security agencies can piggyback on these developments to effectively monitor the huge coastline, thereby reducing the existing gaps. The huge savings that can accrue for military logistics in times of peace and war is for us to imagine. To conclude, I would like to reiterate that logistics is the oxygen that allows the military muscle to grow. The efficient logistics planning and modernization would define characteristic and quantity and quality of our operations and would provide the required planning flexibility to our commanders. Development of coastal infrastructure and inland waterways for economic development of the nation aids the concurrent development of nation's maritime military logistics capability. Complexity of military logistics is increasing day by day, and integration of coastal infrastructure with hinterland, rail and road networks, as well as the integration of online maritime logistics management systems with the military logistics systems would go a long way in further strengthening the military logistics. With that, I come to the end of my talk, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Captain Saravjit, for that extremely interesting talk on a very lesser known aspect of infrastructure. Saravjit spoke about coastal infrastructure, seaplanes and jetties and the connectivity of ports to the manufacturing hubs. This indeed is an extremely important topic, and we stand much wiser now after the talk given by him. He also spoke about energy security. A very interesting thing we read about recently is the double-decker 4-lane elevated highway which is being planned from the Chennai port to Madurai, which completely sort of bypasses the city and doesn't permit the traffic going to the port to interfere with the traffic within the city. So it is initiatives like this which are going to make a significant difference to the manner in which we conduct we look at infrastructure in the country. With that, we come to the final talk of this session by Brigadier Inder Sethi from the Ordnance Directorate. He will be speaking to us about our experiences with the Computerized Inventory Control Program, the CICP. So I hand you over to Brigadier Sethi.
Sir. Sir, at the outset, I would like to thank the Director St. Joe's, General Ravi Arora as well, the session chair, and my co-panelists. And I'm also, my apologies, sir, for requesting a reschedule of my presentation for this session. As post-lunch, I'll be a little busy. Without further ado, sir, I will just start my presentation. What I head, sir, is the project CICG, which stands for Computerized Inventory Control Project. I head it. It is one of the only enterprise level application of the 3 services, which is currently running successful. So just give me a brief on how we've come here. But before I proceed, sir, let me just touch upon 3 very important aspects of the RML. If you remember, this concept, sir, was on a couple of decades ago. 3 important tenets which apply to something like the supply chain of the Army Ordnance Corps would be a single logistic information decision support system, a distribution-based logistics, and total asset visibility. The other 3 would obviously be in the domain of the OL, so I will not touch upon that. These are the 3 that we'll be building on as I go along in my presentation, sir. Now, a word about the AOC supply chain, sir. We handle about 5.91 lakh items inventory, ranging from clothing items to the ammunition. But a word here, sir, the project CICG of the Army Ordnance Corps, the supply chain is a subset of the entire Indian Army supply chain, as is also there in the brief of this particular webinar. And apart from the tiered way of handling our stores is concerned, as you can see from the DOUs at the base to the regional ordnance depots, the mother depots to the Army headquarters, the other 4 intrinsic stakeholders in a supply chain are the sources of supply, which is the ordnance factory, the PSUs, the industry. And a very important role of budgetary allocation and control is performed by the CGDA, the PCDAs, and the IFAs. A very important function of the QC/QA by the DGQA is performed. And finally, obviously, we are beholden and we have to respond to the field army and provide them their authorization of stores. The project, sir, the history dates back to the 80s. However, sir, we really took shape with the first phase, which was in the year 2002, which was a pilot phase in which we implemented the pilot project in COD Delhi Cant and connected the Ordnance Directorate, sir. This particular project was executed by our system integrator, which was Messrs. Tata Infotech. Now, I believe it's the TCS. And this was a bespoke application, a custom-made application, which we had implemented. It ran successfully for about 10 odd years. But then we did feel that one of the lessons that we learned was that a very fast rate of technological obsolescence is happening. So you really can't work on, customized applications. And as we were guided by MDI Gurgaon, who were consultants way back in 2008, that the ERP was the correct way to go. And in 2015, we concluded a contract of SAP ERP implementation with Messrs. Larsen Toubro Infotech, who are our system integrators. And till 2018, we had the go live in our 4 lines of business. That is the ammunition, the aviation, the ordnance, and the vehicles. A very important part, which I would refer back to my previous slide, was also the integration of the DGQA, the Ordnance Factory Board, the IFA, and the CGDA. So a complete live working integrated supply chain was something that we really wanted to implement on an ERP, and we could do that. And it's been running for the past 3 years, and we are in the phase of the next phase involves the rolling out of this particular, the entire ERP the processes have been captured now, and they will be rolled out to every entity of the AOC, including the elements of the ordinance with the EMA. That's numbering about 360. That's a huge project that we have in front of us. We're currently at the RFP stage. And so the current phase that we're implementing, which is phase 2, we call that the investment phase. This will, and the next phase, we're really calling the ROI phase, when the actual results will fructify with every entity having been connected. So now, so what did we really put in place was a very high availability architecture. So we implemented SAP on an IBM DB2 pure scale database, which is a global first. There is no such similar implementation anywhere in the world. We have a scalable and dedicated tier 3 data centers. And as you see on the map, you have a primary data center and a nearline data center for a zero loss solution, along with the DR disaster recovery data center as well. So we're looking at uptime of 99%, which roughly matches what the Google also promises. So what are the benefits that we had from this sort of a system that we put in place? It was a 400 crore project, sir. That is something which had been implemented. So what that brought to bear was, as was also being discussed in the previous session, that visibility of stocks would play a very important role. That is something that came through. But the online progressing of the procurement cases and the e-approvals by DGQA and the IFA resulted in faster issues and procurement cycles. A very important aspect of the ammunition inventory is the shelf life management pan-India. Today, we are able to block any hazardous ammunition issue at a click of a button. Scales, which are the basis for all authorizations and planning, have been digitized. And we are able to look at accurate forecasting using techniques which are available in the ERP, for example, the Advanced Planning Optimizer, which is giving us yielding very good results. But the lessons, since the topic that was given to me, what were the lessons that we really learned from this? So one of the lessons that we really learned are that bespoke software or customized software, well, that really is a bygone era. It's actually the ERPs, or even, if I may, the best of the breed ERPs, maybe specifically for maybe the military, is actually the way ahead. Change management. Now, this is something which is very, very crucial, because ERPs, when you implement, it actually implies business process re-engineering. And it is for us to adapt to that ERPs, we standardize the best business practices. And this requires a top buy-in to ensure success. Sir, the industry would also agree that ERPs are notoriously difficult and very challenging to implement. And amongst the failed part of the 50% of the ERPs, as the stories go, are stories of Nikes and Hewlett Packards also, which have failed to implement the ERPs. So we are one of that success story, because we also felt that a dedicated subject matter expert team from our side and their continuity is something which played a very, very essential role in adapting and implementing the ERP. But another thing which just got raised was how do you ensure business continuity planning of a system like this during pandemic-like situations? So that is a thing that must be very, very lucidly clear in any contract that we go in for implementing an ERP of this nature. But the biggest plus that we found was the planners who had prepared a dedicated tier 3 data center, which is a huge advantage and is a must if you're planning to go out pan-India on an ERP of a logistic nature. I think the HDFC Bank issue, we're all aware that the HDFC Bank was stopped by RBI last year to issue any credit card or launch any digital product, because their data centers were constantly failing and the users were not getting the right kind of service. So that is the huge requirement that a system like an ERP requires, having a dedicated tier 3 data center. This brings me to another point, sir. Amy Webb, in her book Signals Are Talking, uses a very beautiful term called chronologically ambidextrous. Sir, we've been talking about forecasting. That is something built into supply chains. It's a long-term demand forecasting approach, which is the traditional way of working. But the demand spikes require adaptation to the new scenario. And shortages will certainly result due to sudden events. And you're trying to push demands at that stage will result in a bullwhip. On the other side sits demand sensing, sir, which is the short-term demand forecasting approach, which will leverage not only your historical data, but external data also to predict the demand spikes. And this will really help in short-term demand volatility, crucially reducing your supply chain lag, and allows early response to demand surge. As we saw, sir, during the COVID scenario, I was also posted somewhere in the field, and suddenly our hospital clothing took a top priority, and our supply chain obviously had to really come up to stand to speed to produce the results and make the stores available. So apart from looking long term, it's time that we start looking at short term issues also from our supply chain, which would be able to give to an authorized user his requirement. Another word, sir, which I read in the brief was the term called, which we're all now focusing on, is joint logistics, sir, which is the way forward, whether it is theaterization or joint logistics or integrated logistics. I have been part of a tri-service study, sir, and I've been looking at this, and what I really find is, sir, that instead of wanting to develop a specialized mother of all application or a software, what we really need is a data virtualization approach. From that, what I imply is when you have the three ERPs of the three services, they talk to their own data warehouses, and you have a central data warehouse on which whosoever is the decision-making headquarter makes decisions. Because in the end, sir, you would really be talking in just about a range of approximately 30,000 common items between the three services that we're looking at. So you really can't have something which is a time and cost intensive solution. So this is something I thought I would just add. My experience tells me this. I thought I must share this. The other issue, sir, is something that as we all are talking about the military supply chains, the supply chain in the military overhead, three important aspects I thought must really catch our attention and should be something guiding us ahead. The resilience, sir. So the COVID and the coronavirus clearly showed that even military chains, supply chains are, can be effective, and they really need to be resilient towards this particular. We've seen the US Army also face the same trouble. A small vessel, well, not really small, but a vessel getting stuck in the Suez Canal can have global ramifications right down to our supply chains as well. So we are not really isolated, but we are somewhere integrated into this global supply chain. So that is something that this disruption aspect we really have to keep track of. Not to forget, sir, the word national security and supply chain would start being spoken of in one sentence. You can see the executive order passed by the US president on how the American supply chains were supposed to reconfigure themselves to meet the requirement of life-saving equipment during the COVID. So our role as a military supply chain will also might expand to fulfill the national security need during times of pandemic. We'll have to be mindful of this as we go ahead with the planning, sir. Well, while I'm talking of the future, I'm reminded of how Alexander in 329 BC had actually organized a disruption-proof supply chain when he planned to advance into Afghanistan, sir, and feeding off the farms and the workshops along the way. To conclude, sir, greater asset visibility will allow better optimization of resources. About that, there is no doubt. The more data that we crunch, sir, will allow us increased adoption of AI and big data analytics. And that is what will give us power to be predictive in our nature. And as I always ask, sir, whenever I cover this topic of AI and big data analytics, I always ask that which was the first agency in India which purchased the first supercomputer? It was always names like ISRO, the IIT, even Tata, but it was a very humble person, Mr. Champaklal Chokse, who founded Asian Paints, one of the co-founders, in 1970, sir, bought a supercomputer from the US worth 8 crores. And what that has given him is 55 years of knowing every paint shop in the country. What do they actually require? How much paint? What color will be required? He delivers them thrice a day. So my point is, sir, the minute we have data, historical data with us, we should be able to start making sense and start looking at accurate forecasting, sir. I had been hearing words of IoT, blockchain, and while we must explore areas for the adoption of new technologies, sir, but it shouldn't be because it merely exists. But what problem will it help me solve? Unless and until we do that, there should be not a hurry to implement a solution and then have a white elephant waiting with us. But it is important that we study how will it really help solve an existing problem that I'm really facing here. Finally, sir, I think sum total for a supply chain professional, there's nothing but more important to prepare for the never normal, which is likely to be the future scenario. With this, sir, I've come to the end of my presentation. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Thank you, Brigadier Sethi. And we actually could not have got a better speaker than Brigadier Sethi to speak about the CICP, an officer with a lifetime passion in computers. And the lessons which he has brought out in the manner in which the CICP has been implemented in the Indian Army, it is going to, and especially in
Dilip, just check. Dilip, we have lost you. There is some bandwidth problem. Okay, while Dilip comes back, there are two questions, or in fact, there are four questions, two of which are being answered directly by Sarvpreet and Gaurav Kaushal. Sethi, there are two questions for you, if you can take them on. And
Sure.
one is to wait.
Yeah, I can see, sir, we are a DP.
There are two questions. One is, can we integrate CICP with other services ERP? And second is, how has integration with IFA and DGQA been achieved? Are the concurrences and recommendations given online?
Yeah.
So could you take them on? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Sir, I'll take the first question. In fact, this particular issue of how do we integrate the three ERPs has been on our mind. As I mentioned, I'm also part of the study. I'm representing the Indian Army in that. And the issues, the options are only two in front of us. One is, would you rather start integrating the three ERPs, because these are three different set of processes. Each organization has its own set of business rules, right? Now, if you have three sets of business rules, imagine there is one item, a pen, for example. On one pen, how do I apply three business rules? Because each organization plans its supply chains, its buffer stocks, and its entire way of working in a different manner. So we thought, and that is what I'd shown on that slide, which I titled Joint Logistics, that if we can extract the data from that, data virtualization, whatever format, make it a central data warehouse on which you can have the entire data being presented to the decision-making body, who could direct transfer of X stock to from one, let's say, a naval depot to a army depot, or an army depot to an Air Force depot. It's very, very simple. We know that is possible. That's how most of the ERPs in the industry also come together. And we don't really have to start, reinventing the wheel. So it's a long chapter, but I'll cut short here and move to the next one, sir. The next question, I think, was how have we achieved the integration with the IFA, the DGQA? Well, that, sir, is a very, very long story, but let me put this clear that so we had our own network. The Army has its own network. If you want to bring a civilian external agency on board, it is not possible as per the current cybersecurity policy. So we went ahead by moving our entire ERP on a VPN, a highly secure VPN. We have our own data center. We could build in the cybersecurity. We have extended the VPNs to the IFAs and the DGQAs, and we are using the modules that we have developed, integrating the DGQA at the CQA level, which are affiliated with the CODs. So is the case with the IFA. and the PCDA. So yes, to a large extent, the online concurrences are being accorded through our applications.
Thank you. Is Dilip, are you back?
Yeah.
Dilip?
Yes,
Okay.
sir. I'm back, sir. I'm sorry it got cut.
Okay.
And
Back to you. I think we can sum up now.
yes. As I was saying, that we were very fortunate in this session to have had a very eclectic set of speakers, and we had Shri Amit Ghosh he's a Joint Secretary in North, Brigadier Gaurav Kaushal, who spoke on the BRO. We had Captain Sarabjit, who spoke on coastal infrastructure, and finally Brigadier Sethi on CICP, and who brought out the lessons that we've learned from the CICP. These lessons are going to help us as we go on our path towards integration. And when we actually talk about jointness and integration of logistics between the three services, and then finally with national logistics, we will also need to integrate the ERP solutions. And so these lessons are going to be helping us. So we've come to the end of a very knowledgeable session on military transportation outlook, and I hope that all our viewers and listeners have benefited from this. With this, I hand you over back to General Arora, sir.
General Srivastava, sir, all yours.
Thank you, Brigadier Dilip, and all the co-panelists. I think that was a wonderful session, very informative indeed, particularly the interjections about the national highways and the capabilities in the delivery of BRO. I think the nation has been saluting their effort right through this standoff in Eastern Ladakh and all situations in the Northeast. I have personally experienced them, having commanded formations in some of the most underdeveloped parts of India, that is the lower and the upper Subansiri. He spoke about the Daporejo bridge, which is very close to my heart. So this delivery of BRO is indeed heartening, but a lot more still needs to be done to get that last mile connectivity, and where that mile lies, as General Upadhyay mentioned. And of course, we thank Inder for the insight into CICP. And you have made a very telling observation on something that we can discuss more when in the later session, when we speak of the naval and the air force systems, as to what is their view on integration. Thank you so much on behalf of all our participants and viewers. We thank you for a very informative session. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. We will close this session now. We'll open the next session and request everybody to migrate. We'll wait for 5 minutes there before we start the next session. Thank you.